It's the first time that we've ever had an all-radio panel, and we've been doing these big talks and small talks for a number of years. It's also the first time that we've had an all-woman lineup. Conscious decision, but it's a delight to see you all here. So I'm going to hand over first of all to Debbie.
Hi. Thank you for giving up your Tuesday evening to come and see us. So I am editor of Radio 1 and 1 Extra Newsbeat. So we provide the news service from bulletins to 15-minute programmes for Radio 1 and 1 Extra. So I have been at the BBC for about 11, maybe 12 years. And I've always been at Newsbeat, but I've done a million other jobs. So I started off as a broadcast journalist, and then I did a bit of presenting, and then I commissioned documentaries working with indies, and then I was a senior reporter editing the programme daily, then I was online editor, then I was entertainment editor, then I was planning editor, then I was deputy editor, and now I'm editor. So when people try and tell me things can't be done, I can always say, I know, I've been there, I know it can be. So I started off my career in newspapers, actually, quite some time ago, in the northwest of England, because I went to university in Preston, because at the time there were only 2 universities doing a journalism course, so St Andrews and Preston. So I did my degree in journalism and specialised in newspapers at the end of the year because I could always write, and even though I wanted to get into radio, I thought it's probably easier for me to go via the route of newspapers. So I worked in local newspapers for a while, and then on my weekends I would moonlight at various radio stations, and I wasn't allowed to because you shouldn't have been working for any other media in your patch, so I had a pseudonym. I was Claire Chambers, my middle name, and my mum's maiden name. So yeah, and then eventually I went into radio full time. So that's kind of my journey into broadcast journalism. So I worked at Rock FM in Preston, then the controller of BR&B in Birmingham was driving down the motorway and heard me reading the news and offered me a job in Birmingham. So that's the one and only time I've been headhunted so far. So I'm really proud of that. And then I came down to London, worked at Capital for a few years, and then went to Newsbeat. So kind of, I think people sometimes have quite an old-fashioned image of Newsbeat, and we've been going for 46 years now, and we are so much more than radio now. It's been a long time since we thought of ourselves as just radio. We make documentaries that go on iPlayer, we make TV packages, we do still do the radio because that's important. We still have around 8 million listeners every week, so we can't ignore that, but obviously we're on social platforms as well. We write online articles, and pretty much our mission, I would say, is to make sense of the world for our audience. So it's 16 to 24 is our key target area, though we go skew a little bit older. But we try and make sense of the world for them, reflect the world, reflect and tell their stories and give them a voice as well, and also entertain them. But if you have a little watch of this video, you can see that we've changed quite a lot from just a radio station.
In videos, in pictures, in everything.
As we speak to Joy's sister and brother, another family member interrupts with a big update.
In the church. How could you miss that person? How?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, they charged him. With what?
You alright, oh?
Yeah, I'm alright.
Life is a cruel thing.
One Extra. The new season is only a week old, but already there are problems off the pitch. This is a Newsbeat special on racism in football. Over the next 15 minutes, there will be language some of you might find hard to listen to.
It is horrible. Obviously, the squad are thinking, like, what's this for? What's going on here? You're right, and seeing if you're like reassuring you that it is fine, but it does frustrate me.
I think the issue is actually being proactive and sorting it out before the issues become live. And I think that's important that the powers that be, we need to make sure that that's the case.
Listen, this needs to be as big as financial fair play or other things on the agenda like corruption in sport.
It's really important for us to have in my team a really diverse range of people, and that's not just race, it's also age. So the youngest person on our team is 19, and that goes right up into the 50s because you need that blend of ideas and experience. Different classes bring different stories, people with different abilities, and it's really, really important. And that's why we get that variety of story, and that's why we have that ruthless focus on our audience. You know, we won't do something that's not right for our audience. And over the last, I think, maybe 10 years, I have seen some changes with the audience, but I would say for the most part, things like simplicity and just explaining things really clearly for them and really making sure that we are telling stories through people is our main achievement and the reason why we're still going strong. And I think sometimes people can make assumptions about a young audience that they're not into certain subjects or that they're more liberal than they are. Our audience is quite conservative with a small c. They're quite traditional. They are a bit of a contradiction. So, for example, I think over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot of stories about equality and fairness, and they're passionate about that, yet they don't really like people who are claiming benefits. So there's sometimes a bit of a kind of contrast, and it makes it challenging, but also quite exciting as well. I'd say over the last 4 or 5 years, there's definitely more interest in international stories. So we explain protests in Hong Kong, in Sudan, we cover flooding in Bangladesh, yet they don't really like international aid and the idea of money going outside to these countries. So you're always balancing their ideas and their beliefs. I think trend-wise, still mental health is a big thing for our audience. Climate is a big thing for our audience. Identity really plays highly. Housing. But mainly the big stories are the big stories for all age groups. It's just how we treat them that's often different, I would say. And then to finish, I'm just going to say a little bit about kind of what works and what doesn't work in terms of PRs. As I said, we have a ruthless focus on our audience. So the worst thing anybody in PR can do is phone us up or email me a story that has no relevance to the audience whatsoever. And you can do yourself a real disservice by that, because if you get a reputation for contacting an area which you know, well, you should know, isn't interested in the story just relentlessly, it really doesn't do your reputation much good. So I would say always focus and think, are they really going to be interested in this? Because if they're not, there's no point in sending it to them. It's a waste of your time. You're not going to persuade me to do story on, I don't know, gardening for the audience. Always think about if it's statistic based, is it robust? You know, if it's a study of 250 people, I'm not interested. It's not robust. So for us, robust is at least 1,000 people, I would say, unless it's a very specific group of people. So for example, if you did a survey of 500 and they were 500 with a certain type of eating disorder, then you have something a little bit different to just 500 random people about a random topic. The other thing I would say is what really works well, case studies work really well, and also stories that aren't about kind of predictions almost. So say, I don't know, 55% of students in their third year at university say they feel it will be harder to get a job once Brexit kicks in. It's too wishy-washy for us. We don't kind of deal in those kind of stories, certainly not on Newsbeat and those hypotheticals, because of course people would say that. So yeah, really have a think about what you're trying to sell and who you're trying to sell it to. And the more targeted, the better. And if it doesn't suit that area, even though you might want to approach them, don't, because you do yourself a disservice and a damage reputationally. And that's all I'll say.
So hi, I'm Jo Parkerson and I'm the Entertainment Content Director for Bauer Media. And I run a team of 5 people, and we like to call ourselves the Entertainment Hub. A little bit of history on me. So I started my career as an entertainment reporter back in '99 for Chrysalis Radio, and I reported for Galaxy and for Heart, and then presented a few shows, moved on to LBC when we bought LBC. Then I went on to be showbiz editor for Global Radio, and I did that for about 6 years. And in 2013, I went across to Bauer to set up the Entertainment Hub. And the challenge with Bauer was to pull together a media business of really big heritage magazine and radio brands who all worked pretty much in silo. So not really sort of talking to each other, not really sharing any information with each other. And in the case of the magazines, actually sometimes actively working against each other, which in 2013 was a little bit crazy when, you know, I'd come from Global and we were all pulling together, and we realised that there was, you know, real strength in numbers. So my job was to really convince the guys that there was strength in cross-promoting, strength in sharing content, and strength in actually sharing with you guys, film publicists, labels, PRs, that giving them one point of access to our brands, i.e. come through the Entertainment Hub and we can offer you as much bang for your buck with one visit. So if you've got a celebrity, we can bring that celebrity in and do interviews on Magic Breakfast, Kiss Breakfast, Heat Radio, something for Grazia, something for Empire. And that's what I set about doing back in 2013. And yeah, it was a pretty big job, not going to lie. But 6 years on, I feel like we're in a really, really good place. But to say that the landscape's changed in those 6 years is an understatement. I mean, I think when I first joined Bauer, we were really still talking predominantly about audio for our radio stations. You know, we did a bit of filming, there was lots of pictures. And now, I mean, as you know, I look at my team and I've got a talent booker stroke digital content producer, 2 digital broadcast journalists, so completely multimedia, and 2 video producers. And while we pride ourselves on the entertainment content that we send to our radio stations, so if you think of the fact we've got news desks all around the country, as well as in London, we also, I would say that the Entertainment Hub is the entertainment news desk, because we're in what I still think is the entertainment capital of the world. I think London is pretty much where it's at when it comes to entertainment. But what we really pride ourselves on now is the digital content that we push out, and the creative formats that we're looking to get through when we get celebrities in the building, or when we go to junkets, or on red carpets. It's not about doing that straight interview for us anymore. That doesn't cut through And there's a lot of entertainment content on socials, as you know, and there's a lot of people doing what we're doing. Big media businesses, the BBC do it excellently. I mean, I think what Radio 1 does in particular in terms of their digital offering is out of this world. And we have a lot less resource, I would say, but I really love what Radio 1 does. It's incredible. And again, looking at across the road to Leicester Square with Global and what they're doing, it's busy out there. And then you've got Lad Bible, and then you've got, there's just so many people just putting entertainment, celebrity content out on their socials. But what we're trying to do is cut through and raise awareness for our many brands. And obviously, digital content is the most shareable content. So I'm going to stop waffling now and play you this video. This is kind of sums up my team, the Entertainment Hub, and what we do for Bauer.
Wait, is Kevin the cutest Jonas brother?
How did you pick that one out?
The answer is yes.
The Ents Hub are an award-winning team of entertainment content creators. Our mission is to bring entertainment stories to life on air and digitally, bringing hundreds of big-name celebrities through our doors.
I love naps. Naps are fun.
I actually wrote a song that I think they might be messing with. I heard this the other day.
We offer talent a one-stop shop. And if they can't come to us, we go to them.
Is this a film that you think that your kids can watch?
Oh my God, of course. I mean, my kid's favorite movie is The Exorcist.
Our digital innovation and passion for video has had a huge impact on the business, and our unique creative content has increased brand awareness, reach and engagement by over 200%. Collaborating closely with our commercial team, we're able to turn any talent visit, red carpet and event a chance to make bespoke branded content.
Tyrion Lannister or Daenerys.
And harnessing a close connection with our portfolio of brands, we've created engaging and unique projects like Heat's Big Night In, Love Island's Under the Duvet and Bauer's mental health awareness campaign, Where's Your Head At? As a team of hardworking pop culture fanatics, we spark viral moments, make global headlines and engage with millions of fans across our social platforms, striving always to give audiences the content they really want.
I have a huge interest in commercial content, clever commercial content, not something that looks like an advert, sounds like an advert. And I do work closely with our commercial teams to leverage content like we have, which is obviously entertainment content is hugely valuable, and we have a huge archive of entertainment content, and we have great access to talent. So it's about how we can use that to amplify commercial campaigns. I think a good example of what we do is with our film team. So anytime they're working on a commercial campaign for a film, we will amplify that, making sure that we're getting the talent access, informing them of what talent access we've got, telling them about any red carpets we might be doing, junket visits, set visits, so tying it all up and offering the film studio a complete 360 on that particular film. We also work really closely with Sky on campaigns for things like Sky Cinema, so everything that you would see on Sky Cinema, we will have covered the junket on theatrical release, so it's great to be able to dive into our archive of content, which is now a little bit more entertaining, as I said, than just videos, and use that to amplify our creative pages that might sit alongside a campaign. And then, as you saw mentioned then, things like Heat's Big Night In, so that's branded content ideas that we've come up with as part of a pitch. So Talk came to us and they wanted to do something different other than your average sort of radio spot play and advertorials in magazines. So we came up with this video series called Heat's Big Night In, where we just dissected what had happened in X Factor and Strictly that weekend with celeb guests, including every week people from Strictly and the X Factor. Talk put their name to it, but it was more than just a badging exercise. It really actually changed the opinion of people what they had on Talk, so it really worked. And we've done spin-off series like Love Island Under the Duvet, which is where we get those lovely Love Islanders as soon as they come out of the villa into our studios to basically gossip about everything that everyone else is gossiping about, and obviously does huge numbers. So. Is very commercially attractive. We do lots of Twitter Amplify deals, so working with the likes of H&M or Specsavers if they're looking for content around Britain's Got Talent or I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. We're going to be talking to those people anyway. It's a pre-roll thing, but you know, it works for us. So yes, quite a lot of commercial activity that goes on with my team. Talking about what works in terms of PR, I think you know, I think what we've just said is that really is, as long as it feels like you've done your research into who our brands are and what our audiences are. The one thing I really hate is I've got a lovely story for Heart. So that's not my radio station, and you'd be surprised at how many times that happens. Or, you know, Joe, love to chat to you about something for Capital. I was like, I don't work for Capital anymore. It's, you know, it's all about looking at the brands that we have and what you think might work for those brands. And obviously, you know, you're talking about it's like it's Radio 1 and 1 Extra, but I have so many different brands that you could talk to me about. I can be that point of access for all of our radio stations. So Magic, Absolute Radio, Kiss, Heat, Kerrang, Planet Rock, Scala Radio, which we've just launched, which is our new classical station. And then on the magazine side of things, Grazia, Heat, Closer, Empire, Pilot. I'm, you know, a great point of entry to those brands, particularly if you've got a story that involves a celebrity. We can put together a multi-brand schedule for you, but again, it's just making sure that that's a, you know, it's a strong story. The celebrity hasn't been shoehorned in. And the other thing I will say is that we're quite conscious of not giving away things for free. So if it's something that we feel like there might be budget for, then we're not going to just run a story because you've got Anne-Marie, because we can talk to Anne-Marie around her music anyway. So I think it's, you know, it's a case of going, okay, we don't actually have access to that person, so we are interested, or actually, is there a little bit of budget, and we can then amplify that campaign even further and really turn it up a notch or two. And that's about it for me, I think.
Women's Hour is one of the BBC's oldest brands. We've been running for about 73 years. And it's one of those programmes that people think they know until they listen. They realise they don't know it at all anymore. And I think for us, it's about putting women at the centre of their own stories. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Maybe tell you a bit about where I got to and how I got to Women's Hour. So when I started out, I was freelance. I did radio, I did TV. I worked for quite a number of years, making commercial videos for big companies like DHL, Booker Foods. And I started out in Carlton TV and at Central TV. So I started in the commercial world and been with the BBC for about 4 or 5 years, something like that. So a lot of that time, my early career, the commercial and the sort of BBC corporate side overlapped, which was quite interesting really, because it's a very, very different world. So I started, when I was at Carlton, I worked on political programmes. We did the first London mayors, hustings, things like Neighbours from Hell, which was probably the only pre-recorded programme I've ever worked on. Everything else I've done is live, and I like live. And also sort of live debate shows with Andrew Neil and Nikki Campbell, which were sometimes on serious subjects, sometimes on very sort of trivial, non sort of inconsequential, entertainment-y type subjects. But really my love is factual programming, and it's about real people's stories. And I think that's probably why my journey through my career, 13 years at 5 Live working in the newsroom, I was always drawn to the stories that have people and their lives at the centre. So really, Women's Hour is probably a very natural home for me now, and I've been the editor for about 3 years. I've been at Radio 4 for about sort of 10 years, and I worked on You and Yours and Women's Hour as producer during that time. And I think, I guess the range of things that I've done, commercial, working for companies, making, like I say, corporate videos, working in news. Radio 5 is very, very eclectic. It's serious news, it's politics, and again, it's sort of light-hearted stories and overlap with some of the other things that Debbie's talked about and Joe's talked about. And I think at Women's Hour, the focus really is on stories that matter, that make a difference to people's lives. We do a lot of serious stuff, and I'm always looking for lighter stuff. So we do a lot of stories about violence against women, whether it be abuse, it be Me Too, it be rape, it be changes in domestic violence laws, coercive control, those sorts of things. We do a lot of stories about families and parenting. There is quite a chunk of our audience which is younger than Radio 4. So Radio 4 tends to, it's very different to Debbie's audience. Our average audience is probably in the 60s as a network. We skew slightly younger, and a lot of our content skews much younger. And we started doing a lot more stuff about parenting the last few years. And really, we've got a cohort of women who are educated, professional women who are at home for a short period of time in their lives, who want to keep the grey matter ticking over. They're interested in the world around them, and we provide, interesting content. And some people often talk about a lifeline when they're sitting at home with a small baby. You've been up all night and you're feeding, you're tired. Just to hear something, about trafficking women from Vietnam or something, it reminds you that the real world is still there. I think the other thing that particularly I love about Women's Hour is it's so broad. We can do absolutely anything, as long as it looks through the prism of a female point of view. So whatever your area of expertise, whatever your line of work, there is probably something that will key into Women's Hour audience. You just have to be creative about how you think about it. And it's probably a good time just to hear a little bit of the sort of things that we do, give you an idea of the range.
For the benefit of listeners who will be sympathetic, but you know this, Sally, conflicted as well. You are someone who killed your husband, you acknowledge that, but you are also a victim. But
yes.
What comes first? What comes first in your mind?
I still feel I'm a victim second. I still feel that I know what I did was wrong, and I'm very sorry for that. I have paid a price, and I thought I would die in prison. I didn't care. And it was only through my niece, Dalla, who found Harry at Wistridge from Justice for Women.
I think I said to her, have you had a relationship with a woman? And she just said yes. And I know I then asked, does anybody else know? She said, no, I will go to the grave with this and you are to tell nobody. The way she fixed her gaze on me when she said that, I knew she was serious. It's one of those moments when you know when your mum says no to something, even as a child, there's that look.
I was a very, very difficult boyfriend, and I think that I wasn't informed or educated or even given a space to understand toxic masculinity, but I definitely think that the way in which I view myself as a boy and man had pushed out certain behaviours.
Now, change has come to Northern Ireland. From today, same-sex couples can now get married. And you might recall that back in 2005, Northern Ireland made history. It was actually the first part of the UK to allow same-sex civil partnerships. And the very first couple to exchange their vows at Belfast City Hall back then were Shannon Sickles and Gráinne Close. And they are with us this morning in our Belfast studio. Shannon, Gráinne, good morning to you.
So a glimpse of the range of things that we cover on Women's Hour. And you can see we're not a news programme. We cover news events, we cover topical events. We are not an entertainment programme, but we cover the big films, the big books, the big releases, big game video releases. We are not a programme that's just about celebrity, but we have really, really big names. We've got Helen Mirren next week. You'll see her in many other places. You'll see her on Women's Hour, here on Women's Hour. But we try and do those interviews in a different way. What's interesting about what everybody said today is that the media landscape's absolutely saturated, and everybody is trying to make an impact, and everyone's trying to cut through. I mean, I feel that we're very fortunate because we have a big audience, and as a big brand on Radio 4, it's a destination, so people come to us with stories, celebrities come to us, so that makes it easier, because I've got a really small team. We're on air 6 days a week. And we have an hour's programme. I've got we're multimedia, we use Instagram, Twitter, all these parts of our production have to be serviced. And so, keeping the stories really, really focused and having a really clear editorial idea of what we will and what we want to put on the programme. Like Debbie was saying, we're absolutely ruthless. If it doesn't serve our audience, we're not going near it. And I think from a point of view of pitching things, that's something that is really helpful for you to think about. What would that particular audience get out of this particular item? Why am I pitching it to that particular programme? So yes, the focus is very much on women's own voices telling their own story. For generations, women have had their lives talked about. They've been talked down to, they've been talked across, and they haven't had a voice in the room. And our priority is to give women a voice to talk about their own lives in their own words. And that is a central thing that drives through every single editorial decision we make. So if we are doing a story about divorce, adoption, we did something about fecal incontinence the other week, but it's getting women to tell their own stories. We don't talk for women, let them talk for themselves. And again, diversity across our output is really important. We try and reflect that in our team. We try and reflect that across the stories we talk to, the guests we talk to. And it, in a way, it doesn't matter what your background is, your attitude and your experience on that. If you're talking about Brexit, we want people from every background, every walk of life, every country to talk about their own experience of it. It's the same with childcare. You know, if you've got a big family that helps you, or if you're on your own, you're living in a bedsit in Doncaster, in London, in Newcastle, it doesn't matter. We want all of your experiences. So I think when it comes to case studies, we sometimes find that the case studies are quite London-centric. Well, we can do London, we're in London. So getting case studies that are outside London and getting different voices and different communities. Class is one of the big areas of diversity that we as a media are not covering properly. We're Women's Hour. We have 99% female. I mean, you heard somebody talking about toxic masculinity there. We do have men. We had a male expert this morning. But predominantly we're talking to women, whereas if you talk to a lot of other programmes, they're trying to get their quota of women up. I mean, news programmes are trying to do it. I mean, the BBC is a big thing, isn't it, Debbie? But for us, getting diversity across the board is really important. Young voices, old voices, different classes, different religions, different backgrounds, it's really, really important. And so that drives a lot of what we do. I said we're multimedia. We have a podcast, which is a daily podcast. It's our programme. So we know a lot of people can't listen at 10 o'clock in the morning. We're on every day. But the podcast, it's one of the BBC's biggest podcasts. I think it's the 4th biggest or something. And we also have a parenting podcast. And we have, until recently, had a late night Women's Hour, which is sort of a podcast that's a programme and a podcast that skews younger. That's off air at the moment. But actually, a lot of the content of Late Night Women's Hour with the younger audience crosses over to what we do, because we do have, for probably the past 3 or 4 years, is a big focus on younger audiences for our programme, because that's a target for Radio 4, because obviously it's got an older audience. And we skew much younger, as I said, than the network, and especially Instagram. We put less emphasis and less effort into Twitter now. It's much more on Instagram, because our audience there is something like 96% female or something, and something like 70% under 40, something like that. So compared to, as I say, our network, I mean, it's very different to your audiences in a way, but you've got to keep replenishing your new audiences. BBC Sounds is something that's a new thing for the BBC. It's a new audio product where all of our audio will go through. It's a priority for us. And so if you've got products or case studies or charity or campaigns or something that you think have got something very, very specific, that especially, again, talk to that younger audience, coming through a programme like mine or like Debbie's, is access to BBC Sound, which is another whole platform for audiences and new audiences you wouldn't get necessarily via radio. So that's important. So areas that we are, as a programme, interested in, well, as I said before, everything if you pitch it right. I'll be honest, we don't do a lot of campaigns. We're not a campaigning programme. We give a platform for other people to air their views and things that they feel are unfair or unequal. So we do work a lot with charities, but it's not because we're giving a platform to their campaign. We're probably debating what they're talking about and sort of litmus testing it. Something, I mean, nobody's debating whether rape's right or wrong, okay? But if we're talking about the way the law may change and the inequalities between the attacker and the victim, or the survivor of rape, there's a conversation to be had there. And so, we work closely with Women's Aid and some of the other women's organisations and violence against women organisations quite closely. And what they do, why we end up working quite closely with them is because they understand our remit, we understand theirs, they are reliable, conscientious, their case studies are got huge integrity and authenticity. And if it's that, for me, in choosing items and choosing contributors, it's the authenticity of the voice which is key. And sometimes in the past, maybe not so much here at Women's Hour, but maybe I was at 5 Live or some of the other programmes, people put a case study forward, they're too over-rehearsed. They're too slick, They're cutting out the edges of their story. It feels like something they've written out a million times. Don't over-rehearse your case studies. You need somebody who is confident enough to be on live national radio, TV, video, whatever. But don't over-rehearse them because it's their story. And the reason we want to talk to them is because we want the audience to understand how it feels. One of the big things, again, an editorial driver for my content on Women's Out is how does it feel? Do we know how that person feels? Do we know how that person feels if somebody has, abused them or, treated them in a racist way, or their child has just died? If you've just had a stillbirth or something, how does it actually feel? We talk to people in the moment and we want to know how it feels, not what's happened. Anyone can do that. We want to know how it feels. We did a series about size just earlier in the year, and it's one of those sort of hardy perennials that women's programs will do about size and diets and everything else. It was nothing to do with that. We talked to women who talked about their size and they said how it feels. And there were women of all sizes talking about what they do and don't like about the way they feel. So it's not about judging any particular body size or shape in the way that society might. It's talking about it from the inside. So I think when if you think of pitching to a program like ours, it's that authenticity and integrity of the case studies, and it's about their own personal experience. What else? What else is useful? We do lots. Parenting is useful for us. You know what? Sport. People don't think about. People forget to pitch stuff to sport. We go and ask people about sport, and they go, "Oh, I didn't realise you'd be interested in sport." We do it. We do absolutely everything, really. So, in terms of approaching programs, and I think probably I could speak for all of us, it's like be really, really clear about what you're trying to tell us. I often get into my inbox, which sometimes is like a counter, just reeling. The emails coming in fast. Just general press releases. If you send me a general press release, I'm not going to read it. I'll be honest, I haven't got time. And people sometimes think by sending it to the editor to the programme, they're getting it right under the nose of the person making the decision. Wrong. I haven't got time. I've got programme contact producers who do that. We have systems set up. We've got a really, really reliable system. If you email the website, through the website or to womensout.bbc.co.uk, it comes into our specific email box, which is looked at, every single email is read, and I've got subject specialists who is just fired on. They look at it and make a decision. If it comes to me, I'm not going to read it. So I sometimes think people get that slightly misplaced, think I'll get it to the person at the top. If I've met you at something and you've talked to me about something, it's a story I'm interested in, I say, right, send me an email about that, I know what it is, then it's different. And also sometimes it's just really general. I'm sure it's the same for you, Joe, but certainly the BBC, our production teams are smaller and smaller and smaller. I have 8 people to do all my digital content, 6 days a week programming. It's really, really tight. So if you send an email with a press release and it's really general, nobody's got time to do your work. If you come, what works, somebody comes to me and there's a really clear top line and I think, I know what that's about and I know why my audience will really, really want to know more about that. And then, add another sheet, add an attachment with all the bump and blurb, because it's just like, it's just emails, sea of emails, isn't it? So just clarity, really. Just clarity about what you're trying to tell us and clarity about message. And we like exclusives. So we're just talking to Refinery 29 about it, and they've done an FOI looking at something. I can't tell you what it's about because it's an embargo and I'd be breaching their embargo, but we're going to work with them, and we often find that charities or campaigns move their embargoes to suit us, because this particular thing that it's about, I've got a big series running next week, so I'm not going to do this news as a news story next week because it gets swamped by the series. I've got some features and things running. And so we'll probably, if we work with them, we'll run it in the new year or maybe towards the end of the year. But it means that they'll get a big special. We did one on work, actually, with an organisation called Timewise, which looks really closely at the way that it's sort of about flexible work, it's about working for women. And they did some research looking at the number of jobs that were advertised and how many of them advertised as being flexible part-time, and it was something like, 15% or something. But they came to us and said, we've got this data, we're going to release it, and we're going to do like a general press release to the newspapers and stuff, and it'll get this much in the newspaper. But do you want it, as an exclusive? So we did a whole series around it. We did the figures and we did a whole series. It works for us. We've got content that's targeted, that's specific, it's got really, really good data behind it, and it works for them because they've got a 4 million audience or something, and so exclusives work too. And case studies, we talked about case studies. And lighter content. We're always after lighter content. It can get a bit heavy from time to time. It's nice to dip into some of the entertainment stuff, but just lifestyle-y, lighter stuff. You know, we still do a bit of cooking as well, every now and again. I'm a terrible cook, though. And that's probably it from me. Thank you.